Hi, everybody. Lisa White here with IVF Manifesting a Miracle. And I'm really excited for my guest today for a Soul Sister conversation coming all the way from Australia in Melbourne. This is my friend, Janelle Gullan. Welcome, Janelle.
Hey, thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's such an honor. I've been following you for a while. We've been connected in various women's circles, occupational therapy groups, and I so admire the work you do as an occupational therapist and also doing a lot of body work. Can you share kind of a bit of your specialties and what you focus on?
Yeah, no, definitely. So I really help women get out of their heads and into their bodies so that they can move through those mother transitions with a whole lot more confidence and vitality. And sometimes that might be when they're pregnant or having a baby, but I also start right from conception, particularly when people are experiencing some challenges. Like that is that first step into mothering, isn't it? So
yeah, you've helped me realize, there really is a mothering journey from very early on to all the different stages. It's been a gift that you've helped shed light on for me, that
and
fear stage and
it's such a long journey. Like after birth, it was always traditionally thought that it took at least 3 years for women to fully adapt to that new role, like physically, emotionally, spiritually.
I think
but I really believe
that.
But I really believe I
Yeah.
believe that that transition starts earlier as well. Like, I know there's a tribe in Africa where they don't actually acknowledge the child's birthday. They acknowledge the day that the mother brings the intention of that baby into her heart, into her mind. She has a song for that baby and she will sing that song while she's trying to conceive. So that baby's birthday is from that time. It's like, no, actually, I would like to be a mother. And I think that's another beautiful representation of this journey that we can go on. So it's a long one.
A lot of different specialties that you do with our Vigo abdominal massage. You're certified in that. And what are some of your other certifications that you're
So alongside the Arvigo, I've also trained with Tammy Kent in her holistic pelvic care, and I've also trained with Lynn Schulte in her pregnancy and birth healing techniques. But so many of these things, really at the core of them, is looking at our pelvic space, looking at our womb and the wisdom that actually sits in our bodies there, and how that actually impacts our health and our well-being, and the stories that we hold in these parts of our bodies. We tend to think of stories as something that lives in our brain, as a real psychological sort of thing, but it lives in our body and so powerfully in that womb space, particularly when it comes to creative things like conception and mothering. So I love that wisdom that body work brings to what I offer.
Yeah, I love, gosh, where do I begin? There's so many questions and things I want to jump in with you. But one thing, you've shared with me is we often hold stories in our womb, and at an energetic level, women who are trying to conceive, and, as the women, that I serve are going through fertility treatments and a lot going through IVF, and just, can you share kind of your perspectives on the impact of stories? And I don't even know how to ask the question to you exactly, but
I think there's two key parts that I think about, particularly when it comes to conception, like the stories that we hold in our womb. Like, what is that conditioning that we've had? Like, let's be honest, so many of it grew up with that message that, it's not okay to get pregnant. You need to avoid being pregnant. We spend this first part of our lives getting told how horrible it would be if you accidentally fell pregnant. And stories like that, they live in our womb space. That womb's going, okay, I'm not allowed to get pregnant. That would be a bad thing. And I think that's a lovely example of a story that we can actually hold in our womb space. But also there's this energetic holding and releasing that comes along with our menstrual cycle. So menstrual cycles is something that I talk about a lot.
Yeah, you did.
It's one of those topics that people go, oh, periods and all that kind of stuff. But there's so much wisdom there, and our journey into mothering actually follows the same pattern that comes from our cycle. And if we think about the menstrual cycle starting at the beginning, we've got our Actually, let's start at the follicular phase. So we've got the ovary ripening, ready for that egg to release. Our body is holding on to that egg quite literally as it ripens in the ovary, and then our body releases it. Some people talk about the white bleed in the middle of our cycle. We get that cervical mucus. There's that release in our body, and then our body has that holding pattern that kicks in again as the uterine lining builds up, and then we have that red flow, or our period, our bleeding time, that release phase that we move into again. And I really feel that sometimes our womb can be holding when it's meant to be releasing, and releasing when it's holding. And sometimes that can be because of the stories that we hold in that space. Maybe it's shame, it could be trauma, it could be just tiny little things as well, but they can show up in our bodies, in that pelvic space, in our womb, in so many different ways. So rather than being that releasing that we need at ovulation for that conception, and I believe that releasing is true whether it's an assisted conception, or whether it's how it often happens the other way, we may not have that releasing going on because of some of those stories. And I love the fact that your book is about holding on, but yet there's this really important part of letting go and releasing. And
in my mind, I was going to say that there's this delicate balance, and those, in my book, it's like there's so much of the surrender and so much of the letting go. So the title's almost, hopefully not misleading, but it's holding on to yourself. But what I write about so much is letting go, making space, and surrendering to this whole process. So.
But I think there is so much messaging when it comes to conception and mothering as well, that it's all about holding on and pushing through, and whereas it's actually knowing when it's right to do that and when it's right to completely release as well. And that the menstrual cycle gives us that wisdom, and this womb wisdom that we can tap into wherever we are in that mothering journey, and see if there's something there for us.
So much of what you talk about too is just the power of the feminine energy and getting in that space to receive. And something in one of our talks you shared with me, which I found fascinating, was our ovaries, the right side and the left side.
Yeah.
Can you share? Because I didn't realize one is more masculine and one is more feminine.
Yeah.
I didn't really think about it that way.
And this doesn't just relate to the ovaries. Like, there's a lot of authors, like Tammy Kent is one of them, that talks about this idea of the feminine, which is very much the being energy, just being present, the creative energy in our body that tends to live in the left-hand side of our body. So that's the left ovary, but it's the whole left side of the body. So even our feminine lineage, all those sorts of things can be really, they can play out in the left side of our body. Whereas that masculine energy, that doing energy. So just to be really clear, masculine and feminine energy is not about male, female. It's not gender, like males, people with the opposite anatomy to us, they still have these masculine and feminine energies. It's the doing and the being energy, but that doing masculine energy tends to sit in the right-hand side of our body. But we really do live in a culture that prizes that masculine energy. That's the energy of the patriarchy. It's very much that productivity and thriving and doing, showing up every day is the same, rather than connecting into that deeper sense of being, that creative energy, which is the core of the feminine. And if we're feeling really cut off from that in our daily lives, whether it's because of some of those stories that we hold in our womb, what we have been told is of value in the world, we can really lose that connection with the left side of our body. And sometimes I see that playing out in women's bodies when they are moving to wanting to conceive. It's, what is this energy flow in your body? Is that right-hand side so depleted from all this masculine doing? So all those A-type personalities, I'm looking at you. How do we connect back to that creative sense that lives within our bodies. Because at its core, mothering is just an expression of creativity. It's the most incredible expression of creativity in our bodies. And so sometimes just connecting in and saying, well, how do we go? Just sitting with ourselves in that being, just being present with self and connecting into things that don't match that masculine productive output that we're so conditioned to engage in. What role does that play in our life? And what impact do those stories actually have in our pelvic space?
I resonate with everything you're talking about. And I do see a lot of individuals on this path who are in the doing, got to do more, masculine energy. And I try to really incorporate more of that get in the feminine flow and creativity. I mean, both you and I, with the occupational therapy backgrounds that we understand the power of creativity and being engaged in an activity that you love and creating whatever that is, finding joy and pleasure in little things. No, it's so powerful. I devote a whole chapter to that in my book of this, the whole creative process. Fantastic. How can women support themselves kind of in the pelvic space? I mean, besides like getting quiet, kind of tapping in and listening, just nurturing themselves. Like I'm a big believer in that, and I know you are too, really being good to ourselves. Can you share kind of some ideas of how women can support their womb space?
I think the first big step is just to find out how you go being present with that part of your body, because there's so much around our genitals, our womb, where we tend to dissociate. It's like, oh, the pap smear is coming. Oh, I'm just going to go out of my body for a little while. There's this other procedure. I'm going to go out of my body. And even sex and intimacy. So many of us have had experiences where it's kind of like, yep, I'm just going to come out of my body for a while. And that's a good place to start. What happens if you take your hands, you put them down low on your belly, like your womb sits just behind the pubic bone, so that firm bony part that you feel right down, just between your legs there. The ovaries sit to the side, they're sort of down and in from your hip bones. What happens if you place your hands there and you just bring your breath and your attention to that space? Can you just sit there and notice what is going on there? Or does it start feeling really uncomfortable? Does your mind wander? And yes, that does when we're doing mindfulness things, but why is it wandering? Is it because there's some shame or some sense of taboo there? Or does it just feel yucky? What does it feel like to actually bring your presence, your attention there? And what does it feel like to actually send blessing to that space? Shame can't exist where blessing is present. That's one of the teachings of Tammy Kent. So how can we actually bring our conscious awareness? And blessing might be in a spiritual sense, it might be in a gratitude sense, and just experimenting with being present and connected to that part of your body. Even if you're doing a mindfulness, like a body scan, what happens when you get down to that pelvic space? Is it kind of like, oh yeah, my chest and my ribs and then my pelvic space and down my thighs? Like, how do you move through that space, and can you be present with it? That's something that you can do very simply, just to check in and see what does it feel like.
Like, are we clenching, or are we
what sensations are there? Is there tightness, or is there looseness? Is there spaciousness, or and this is some of the work that I do with the body work. Yes, it can involve touch and actually checking in and giving you some feedback on, oh, there's a lot of tension here, or what are we noticing here? But some of it's just guiding you through that space as well. And sometimes we do need to reacquaint ourselves with that space in a way of friendship rather than a way of foe.
And
that's really befriend it, right?
Befriend our lady parts.
Yeah, exactly. We so need to be friends with our lady parts.
Any other ideas that kind of do you do like visualization? Do you envision for people kind of meditation?
Yeah, I do a lot of guided visualization.
Okay.
If you would like, we could do a little mini one as
Yeah,
part of
I love
this.
that. I love
Um, but so often it's beautiful when you're working with someone one-on-one and you're guiding them through saying, oh, what are you feeling there? What are you noticing there? And then you can start talking specifically to what that might be. Like our body is so incredible. Like we're so head heavy. We also always think our brain's got the answers. But if we come back to our body and we can just be present with it and say, what do you need? What's going on here? What are you holding in this space? The body will speak to us, whether it's a word that comes up or a feeling, just that sense. For some people, those guides that you speak about, they can really come up and be present, be a voice for that space. But it can be quite incredible, the journey that our body takes us on when we take that time just to stop.
You're making me want to dive into this work so much more. I'm absorbing everything you're saying. It's really a gift for ourselves. And connecting with ourselves, and just that we're a whole being. And I think so much of the time we're kind of disconnected from this amazing vessel we have, right?
Yeah, we hugely are. And when we're moving further into that mothering stage, Tammy Kent's got one of her books, Mothering from Your Center, which is all about continuing that mothering journey, being able to draw from this space in our bodies. If we're only drawing from our head and our heart, we're going to wear out. It's the womb space that has that ongoing creative energy that can keep building. This is where we can tap into earth, tap into whatever feels right and relevant to you to renew that energy that we need, whether it is sustaining a conception journey or sustaining that job of raising a child when that comes to us. This isn't something that we just do for conception. It's a real gift we can give to ourselves and our children ongoing as well.
Beautiful. Yeah, I'd love to do the guided meditation. Is now a good time?
Well, let's do it. Okay. So I just want to premise this: if you do this meditation and if you feel like something's coming up and it's not feeling safe in your body, please stop. I'd really encourage you to find someone who could perhaps do this work with you face to face and really hold that space for you. But you know your body best, so join us if that feels right for you. So again, just as you're sitting there, or if you're lying down, I think sitting or lying, it connects us to the ground just that little bit more. If it feels okay, you can close your eyes. And just starting with some deep breaths, maybe hands on your belly. And then just bringing your attention further down your belly and into that pelvic bowl. And thinking about your pelvis like it's a big bowl, maybe like a fruit bowl that you have in your kitchen bench. And inside that bowl is your womb, your vagina, your ovaries. Imagine seeing them there. And just do a check-in how that space feels. Firstly, check in, can you be really present with that space? Or is there something that feels like it's pushing you away or making you feel uncomfortable being there? If it feels okay, I encourage you to do a walk around that bowl, whether that's in your mind's eye or maybe imagining you can become really small and actually go down into your pelvis and do that walk around. So starting at the front, walking around to one side, making your way around to the back, but just noticing what you see, what you feel, what you sense. Are there differences? Is there one side of your pelvic bowl that feels different to the other? Is there tension or looseness? Maybe even colour. lightness, darkness. And coming back to the front of the pelvic bowl. And then I'm going to encourage you to do another walk around your pelvic bowl. But just as Tammy Kent talks about, take something with you this time. Maybe it's a broom or a duster. Maybe it's a hose or a watering can. This time we're going to wash or sweep out that pelvic bowl as we walk around it. So starting again at the front, moving to the side, washing and sweeping as you go. And if you come across something that you think you'd like to wash or sweep away and it doesn't want to go, don't push it. Just let it know that you know it's there and keep moving on, washing and sweeping. Maybe imagining you have like a drain out of your body where everything that you wash or sweep out of that pelvic bowl can drain away. Maybe drain down into the earth. And taking the time that you need and coming back to the front. When you're back to the front, take a few more deep breaths. Just check in again to see how that pelvic bowl feels. Does it feel the same? Does it feel different? What things have you noticed about that space? And when you feel ready, you can open your eyes. A few more breaths. Coming back to this present moment and out of your body.
That was so wonderful.
Yeah. Something really simple that you can do at any time, really, whether you're, traveling on a bus or doing the dishes at the sink, or it might be something you create a little time for. It's just that checking in and noticing what's going on in your pelvic bowl. What are some things that you might actually want to give some love to or give some washing or sweeping to?
That's amazing. You're helping me realize there's some healing I still need to do for myself. And I'll share this openly and vulnerably, but I, as you know, had some complications with our birth, with needing, I had placenta accreta, which they didn't know until during my C-section. And do you see women with complications like that?
Yeah.
So my placenta had attached to my, uterus. And then 3 weeks after having my daughter, I needed to have a hysterectomy, an emergency hysterectomy. And it's not something I've really shared here before, but I felt I want to be open and vulnerable. And I think you're helping me realize, that sacred space, the pelvic bowl. Like, I'd love to hear your thoughts on how it's still my power center, even though I don't have that organ.
Yeah. And that's something that's so important, is like maybe someone is missing an ovary or a fallopian tube or their womb. There's still these spaces in our bodies and they hold that power source the exact same, whether they are physically present or just energetically present. So you can still tap into that space in the same way, whether you actually have those organs or not.
Yeah. And I still have my ovaries, and I just am reflecting because I could really feel that visualization you just guided me through. And there was a lot of loss of blood, which required a lot of blood transfusions that I had to have 2 then, and 3 weeks later. It was a crazy time. And honoring my body's wisdom. Like, that's what you help women do to to reconnect. And our body's always communicating to us, right?
It is.
It has taken, like, I mean, I see a lot of individuals struggling with in the postpartum stage, right? All the hormones and the emotions, and just being gentle on ourselves. And like you said, it can take 3 years, right?
Yeah, at least.
I mean, yeah, like, thank you for sharing all of your wisdom, because it's really a reminder for all of us to just be gentle on ourselves and not feel like we have to be a bounce back right away. And our bodies have gone through this major transition, you know?
And even that idea of going back, like, we can't physically go back. Like, sometimes I think of that mother transition as like going through a door. And I think society tries to think that we're just going to have baby and all our parts bundled up and we'll just walk through like you do when you're checking in at the airport. But it's not like that. Like, we see that door far in the distance, and different parts of ourselves go through it at different times. And sometimes our physical body might be through the other side, but we've got all these other bits of us that are still behind that we're trying to pull through the door and reassemble ourselves into who we are as a mother, as where we are in that point in our mothering journey. And it's not that simple, clean, swift process that is convenient in society. It is long, it is messy. All those changes that come along, like with those hormones, they're actually priming us for that transition to happen. But culturally, our society doesn't hold that space that we need to reassemble all of those parts that we're primed to do. It just leaves us hanging, unhonored, uncelebrated, unsupported. And it makes that transition even harder. And so quickly we pathologize the mother, the woman, whatever stage she is in her mothering journey, where so often it's actually that environment that she is forced to go on that mothering journey in. And women so often end up feeling broken, not because there's something wrong with them, but because our culture doesn't understand this mother transition right from the beginning, when we're working towards conception, all the way through to the other end. And it really does leave women feeling so broken that there's something wrong with them. And that's a gift that I love bringing to women who I work with, that time and that space to unravel whatever needs to unravel and put back together whatever needs to come back together, and do that in a way where that feels like it's normal and it's okay and it's part of that process, such an important part of that process. And we don't always get offered that.
Yeah, I'm reflecting how you said mothering, you say mothering journey, and it starts, I mean, aren't all women mothers in a sense? Would you say that?
Yeah,
I mean,
hugely so.
Women in general, right?
Yeah. Well, if we think of mothering as just an expression of our inner creativity, we can express that in so many different ways. And it might be in mothering children around us that aren't biologically ours. It might be in that own creative sense within ourselves. Like, mothering is just a label for one creative expression. And it is much broader. I think we also need to remember that mother transition happens at any point. Like, it happens after a miscarriage, it happens after a stillbirth, it happens after a termination. Like, I would argue that it happens once those eggs are collected and they're fertilized. Like, that is part of that mothering journey. And when that doesn't go to plan and our conception journey continues, we're actually going through a postpartum at that point. And that postpartum needs to be honored. We need to give those things to our body that we know that we need to recover from that. But I think we need to recognize, even when we've only done that tiniest little bit of what we might think in our heads to be a mothering journey, some of those outcomes, they throw us into postpartum, that after birth. And there's a lot of support that mums really need in that space as well.
Yeah, I love how you talk about rhythms too, and moving with the seasons and phases, and honoring each phase, and even tied with the moon. We've talked about that. Tied with lunar cycles, and any things you can share with your reflections on the importance and meaning of rhythms?
Well, I think we know how important the daily rhythms are in our lives. Like everyone knows, you get tired after the sun goes down, and that's important. We know what happens with shift workers, or if you're jet lagged, it's really good to stick to that rhythm. But we understand yearly rhythms as well. But we forget that we've got this other rhythm within our bodies, this longer infradian rhythm that comes from our menstrual cycle. And it's like sometimes we think, oh, maybe that's guided by the moon, maybe it's a little bit different, but we need to think the moon is just reflecting the sun. And we're starting to get some more research now that these longer moon rhythms, they do actually influence us, and that plays out in our bodies rather than our periods and our menstrual cycles being this weird random thing that's appeared in our bodies for some reason, maybe for the purpose of conception. It actually ties us into nature, to the tides. There's this longer rhythm that sits there, and it is the creative rhythm. Because if you think about any other creative pursuit, like let's say writing a book that's familiar to you, you don't sit down and write and write and write and write and write and write and do and do and write and write and write, and you get my point. At some point, you have to stop that doing, and you have to move into reflection. You have to move into nourishment. You have to move into surrender. You need to wait for those new ideas to come through, and then you move back to writing and reviewing and things like that. And it's the same in our lives. If all we try to do is do and show up in this fully productive peak of our game all of the time, it's not sustainable. We need this feminine rhythm. And I sometimes talk about feminine energy. We think of it as sort of that soft, lovely. Feminine energy is hard ass. It's the feminine energy that makes us go and go and go. It's the feminine energy that gets us up at night when we're so tired, but our child needs us. That is feminine energy. And we have built into our bodies this menstrual cycle that copies that creative rhythm, that calls us back into ourselves and says, you have done so much doing. You have been amazing. Now it's time to reflect and slow down our bleeding time. It's the equivalent of winter. It's that slower season, that real inward season of surrender and nourishment. And then from that, we emerge into the springtime of that follicular phase in our cycle, where we have all that new energy, those new ideas, those things that we want to bring to the world, moving into ovulation, which is that doing phase in the creative cycle. But again, we can't,
doing. No.
Yeah, we can't keep ovulating forever. Like that the egg has to release, and then we need to move into that phase, like the lining building up, that reflecting, that shedding. And I think it's absolutely amazing design how we actually have this rhythm in our bodies, that when we understand it and we give ourselves permission to honor and lean into it, it is such a gift to our bodies. And that rhythm continues. Like if like during pregnancy, we don't have that rhythm in our bodies, but it still exists in the mothering cycle when we go through menopause, or if we have had something like a hysterectomy. Yes, we may not be experiencing it that biological level in our body, but that longer rhythm still exists. And the moon can be a really lovely way to tap into that and just see, how does our body move through that cycle in a monthly fashion. That rhythm is always with us,
pulsing through us, right?
Yeah, definitely so.
I love talking with you. I could talk forever with you. It's so fascinating. And kind of just tapping into that, our own intuition, and trusting our body kind of knows exactly what to do, right? There's nothing we need to force, just allow, really.
Yeah. It's
maybe
sometimes...
that's I feel the full moon energy and new moons and
Yeah.
full moons. I'm really tuned in with. I'll have to look at the other cycles of the moon.
Yeah.
That's special to like, tie that in together.
Yeah, no, definitely. But also when we're tuning into the moon cycle or our own menstrual cycle, it really is that recipe for sustaining whatever we've got going on in our life, whether it is a fertility journey or our mothering journey, like wherever we are in that spectrum. It really is this roadmap that it leads us away from exhaustion and frustration. It's this real consistent roadmap for how to move through those different phases as they come to us. It's pretty amazing.
It is. For any of the women that are right now going through, say, fertility treatments, IVF, any little last words of wisdom you can share with them of things that they could work on or just recognize, reflect on? Given lasting thoughts for those women who really want to become a mother. Yeah. Maybe they're in that feeling the struggle and any kind of thoughts you could share?
I think my biggest advice is just come back to your body. There's so much about these fertility treatments, as incredible as they are, that really bring us into our headspace. It's remembering this tablet, remembering that injection, being worried about that injection, remembering all the appointments that we have to go to, and remembering what's happening here. It's very head-based. And that's not where conception comes from. It comes from that body energy. And so, yes, if we're going on that journey, we need to keep track of all those appointments and treatments and things like that. That's part of that process we need to engage in. But make that time to keep coming back to your body. Talk to your body about what's happening. Sit present in your body and see what messages that your body has for you. See if you can split your time equally between body and head, and start those conversations between those parts of yourself as well. I do work with mums who are going through that, through fertility support, and thinking about what can we actually do to bring more body into those procedures. Like, what can you be doing while you're sitting in the waiting room for that transfer, or while you're sitting in the waiting room for this procedure? How can you actually create a real sense of body connection around you? How can you bring more calm to that, less headspace to that? So I certainly bring some of my occupational therapy skills there, looking at how we receive information from the environment and what sorts of things help our bodies feel in that real calm, supported sort of space. But so often it's coming back to body. And I think really, really being present in what's going on there, and actually asking, well, what options do I have? Like, once I've had this treatment, do I have to go out to the treatment room and pay my bill? Or is there somewhere, like, is there a garden out the back, or is there a room where I can be with my partner so that we can actually just spend some time together and get into our bodies after that transfer or after the egg retrieval or whatever it is? I think when we become aware of what our body might need and what might support us to be a little bit less in that headspace, start advocating for ourselves, and hopefully advocating for other women as well, as this becomes more common, bringing the body into those fertility treatments.
Oh my gosh.
I think it's a really important part of that process, and for some it can be sort of that missing key that they haven't had before.
Oh yeah. No, I feel what you just said. That's amazing. I think, so many women are drained by the financial strains, and you might show up, like you said, you have a procedure and then are handed a bill.
Yeah.
That's not the way you want to leave after saying,
But it's so normalized when we're talking about assisted fertility. I think sometimes we feel like, oh my goodness, I'm so glad this service is here for me and this is how it's being presented to me. But I think we can take back some of our control there and go, actually, what's going to support my body? Am I meant to be holding or releasing in this phase of conception, even though it is facilitated here? And what can I actually do? What can I ask for that will help me be really present to what my body needs to be doing at this stage.
That is such good advice.
Yeah.
Thank you. And you run the Wild Orange Tree account on Instagram and Facebook.
Yes.
And
yes,
your website is the Wild Orange Tree. Is it?
thewildorangetree.com.au on the end.
Yep. I didn't want to forget the AU, Australia.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, you're so amazing. I look up to you in a lot of ways. You have so much knowledge in this space. I have to share, like, you were the first one to interview me, like when I was just getting started. Putting myself out there and doing an interview with you on your in your account. So I want to thank you for helping me, step out and share our gifts, right? Thank you so much. Really appreciate all you do and joining me for this Soul Sister conversation.
No problem. Thank you.
All right. Lots of love.
Bye-bye. Bye.